Mercedes were perfect in qualifying all season, until Miami exposed a flaw that could cost them the championship. One small rule change, one hidden weakness, and one lap from Lando Norris, that's all it took to destroy their dominance. A 1 minute, 27.869, faster than both Mercedes, cleaner than anything they could produce, and suddenly, the most unbeatable team on the grid looks vulnerable. Because this wasn't just a lost pole. This was proof that Mercedes' advantage can disappear, and once it's gone, the entire grid knows it. Coming into Miami, Mercedes didn't just have an advantage, they had control. Every qualifying session in 2026 followed the same pattern. Different tracks, different conditions, different challenges, same result. They always found time when it mattered. It wasn't obvious at first. It never is. Because dominance in Formula One rarely looks dramatic. It looks clean, efficient, almost boring. But that's what made it so dangerous. Other teams stopped asking how to beat Mercedes, and started asking how close they could get. That shift in mindset is everything. Because when your rivals stop believing they can win, you've already won before the session even starts. That was the reality before Miami. But underneath that control, there was a hidden dependency. Something very specific that made the entire system work. Energy. Not just power, but how that power is stored, and more importantly, how it is released in the exact moment a driver exits a corner. That's where Mercedes were untouchable. That instant acceleration, that extra push, that final burst, it was always there. And no one else could match it. But here's where everything begins to change. Because just before Miami, that exact area was adjusted. A small regulation tweak. Easy to ignore. Almost invisible unless you're looking for it. The amount of energy recovery allowed during qualifying was reduced, and the way it regenerates was modified. On paper, it sounds insignificant. But in reality, it removes the exact advantage Mercedes built their dominance on. Think of it like this. Imagine two runners. One of them has a slightly better push at the start of every sprint. Not enough to look unfair, but enough to always stay ahead. Now take that advantage away. Suddenly, they're just as fast as everyone else. That's Mercedes in Miami. They didn't become slow. They became reachable. At the same time, McLaren arrived with something completely different. Not just an upgrade, a transformation. Norris himself said the car felt completely different between practice and qualifying. They found something in the setup that changed everything. And you could see it instantly. First phase of qualifying, medium tires, Norris goes out, and immediately sets the pace. Not just fast. Comfortable. And that's the detail most people overlook. Because in qualifying, comfort is speed. If the car responds exactly how the driver expects, they push harder, brake later, carry more speed through corners. Norris had that confidence. Mercedes, for the first time all season, didn't look like they had more to give. And that's where the first real crack appeared. Not in the final result. In the feeling. Because when a dominant team starts to look normal, even for a moment, that's when everything becomes possible. But what almost happened next nearly erased Norris from the fight completely. And if that had gone differently, Mercedes might still look unbeatable right now. The second segment is where everything almost fell apart. Up to that point, McLaren looked sharp, controlled, ready to challenge. Norris had shown pace, confidence, and most importantly, stability. But qualifying doesn't reward stability for long. It forces you closer to the edge. As the session moved forward, the track gained grip, temperatures shifted, and suddenly the margin for error became almost invisible. Now it wasn't about being fast. It was about being perfect. And Norris wasn't. He attacks the second sector chicane, one of the most technical sections of the entire circuit. High speed, rapid direction change, no room to hesitate. And then, the rear steps out. Not a small correction. A real moment. The kind that instantly threatens your entire session. For a split second, it looks like he's gone. Because in this format, one mistake doesn't cost you a tenth. It can eliminate you completely. He saves it. Just. But that moment reveals something critical. The McLaren is not just fast, it's unstable at the limit. Think of it like running on ice. You can move faster than anyone else, but every step is a risk. That was Norris in that moment. And while he was fighting to keep the car alive, Ferrari stepped in. Leclerc delivers a clean lap, takes the top spot in that segment, and suddenly the pressure shifts. Hamilton right there as well, reinforcing the same message. Ferrari looks composed. McLaren looks vulnerable. Mercedes, still present, still consistent, but no longer dominant. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think Norris struggled because of a mistake. But the mistake is just the surface. The real issue is deeper. The same setup that gave McLaren incredible speed also made the car extremely sensitive. Especially at the start of the lap, when tire temperatures are not fully in the right window. Too cold, and the rear becomes unpredictable. That's exactly what triggered that moment in the chicane. So now the story changes. This isn't just about who is fastest. It's about who can control the limit. McLaren had the highest peak performance, but also the highest risk. And Norris was right in the middle of it. At one point, he drops down the order, sitting dangerously close to elimination. Everything comes down to one final attempt just to survive. One more mistake, and he's out. No pole. No headline. No terrible news for Mercedes. Everything ends right there. But he delivers. And that's what makes the next moment so important. Because the same car that almost spun out of control is about to produce the cleanest, most precise lap of the entire session. And that contrast is where the Real story begins. Now everything comes down to one lap. Final segment. 8 minutes. No margin for error. And after what just happened, Norris knows exactly what's at stake. Because he's already felt the limit. He's already seen how quickly everything can disappear. So this time, the approach changes. He doesn't go out trying to be the fastest immediately. He goes out trying to be precise. The out lap becomes critical. Tires need to be in the perfect window. Not too cold, not overheated. Exactly right. It's like trying to sprint with shoes that only work at one exact temperature. Miss it by a little, and you lose everything. This time, he hits it. And you can feel it from the first corner. No hesitation. No corrections. The car finally responds exactly how he needs it to. First sector, clean. Controlled. Building confidence. But the real test is still there. Sector 2. The same place where he almost lost the car. Same speed. Same commitment. He turns in, and nothing happens. No rear snap. No instability. Just grip. And that tells you everything. The problem was never pace. It was the window. And now, he's inside it. From that moment, the lap transforms. Corner after corner, the car flows. Every input connects, every exit is clean. No wasted movement, no hesitation on throttle. By the time he reaches the final sector, this is no longer about survival. This is execution. And this is where great laps become untouchable. Because at the end of a qualifying lap, tires are at their peak, but also at their limit. Push too hard, and they fall away instantly. So the driver has to make a decision. Hold back or commit. Norris commits. Final corners, full confidence, no lift, no doubt. And when he crosses the line? 1 minute, 27.869. For a moment, everything pauses. Because that lap doesn't just look fast, it feels unreachable. Antonelli goes next. Clean lap. Strong execution. Still over 2/10 behind. That's not a mistake. That's the limit. Piastri follows, confirms the pace. Another McLaren right there. And then Russell? He pushes, but the car doesn't respond the same way. 6th place. More than half a second away. And that's the moment it becomes undeniable. Mercedes didn't lose because of an error. They lost because they couldn't go faster. And that changes everything. Because when a dominant team reaches its maximum, and someone else is still ahead, that's not a bad session. That's a shift in power. But here's the detail that makes it even more important. That perfect lap from Norris only exists because of what almost went wrong before. Without that moment in the previous segment, without that instability, he never adjusts. He never finds that perfect window. And Mercedes might still be on top, which means this entire collapse came down to understanding the limit just before it breaks. And now Mercedes faces a much bigger problem. Because they're no longer chasing a lap. They're chasing an answer. Inside Mercedes, the reaction wasn't dramatic. No panic. No visible frustration. Just silence and a lot of questions. Because when a team like Mercedes loses, they don't look at the scoreboard first. They look at the data. And the data told them something uncomfortable. Antonelli's lap was clean. No major mistakes, no missed braking points, no obvious time left on the table. Just over 2/10 behind Norris. That's not a driver issue. That's the car reaching its limit. And when your best possible lap still isn't enough, you're no longer in control. You're reacting. But it gets worse. Because Russell, in the same car, under the same conditions, ends up 6th. More than half a second behind. That gap is too big to ignore. Same machine. Completely different outcome. Which means the performance window of the car isn't just smaller. It's harder to access. Think of it like a lock that used to open easily. Now the key has to be perfectly aligned. Even a slight deviation, and it doesn't work. Antonelli found that alignment. Russell didn't. And that's a serious problem. Because dominance comes from consistency. From knowing that both drivers can extract performance every single session. Miami showed the opposite. One car near the limit. The other, nowhere near it. And that leads to the real issue. The regulation change. That small adjustment in energy recovery, from 8 to 7 megajoules, didn't just reduce performance. It exposed how dependent Mercedes were on that system. Their entire qualifying strength was built around maximizing that extra energy. That final push out of corners, that instant acceleration that no one else could match. Now, that advantage is smaller. And when your concept is built around something that gets reduced, you don't just lose speed. You lose your foundation. That's the terrible news. Because fixing a setup takes hours. Fixing a concept takes months. And while Mercedes is trying to understand what they've lost, the rest of the grid is starting to understand something else. They can beat them. McLaren already proved it. Piastri right there in third confirms it's not a one-off. Ferrari, just behind, shows they're close enough to challenge with a clean lap. Red Bull, still adapting, still finds a way into the fight by the end of the session. Suddenly, this isn't a one-team story anymore. It's a battle. And battles bring pressure. Because now Mercedes isn't protecting a lead. They're defending it. And that changes how everything works. Strategy becomes riskier. Drivers push harder. Mistakes become more likely. But here's where the story takes one final turn. Mercedes themselves admitted something important. Qualifying hurt them. But the race might be different. And that creates a completely new layer of tension. Because if their race pace is still strong, they can recover. They can still control the outcome when it really matters. But if this weakness carries into race conditions, then Miami wasn't just a bad session. It was the moment their entire season shifted. So now, the real question isn't whether Norris destroyed their dominance. That already happened. The real question is much more dangerous. Did Miami expose a temporary weakness? Or did it reveal that Mercedes was never as untouchable as everyone believed?